my gosh. All right. We've got Alex Ostberg here today. He's one of a kind. No one's like him. I can't even believe he agreed to do the show today. Welcome, everyone. So Alex is a 7-time All-American. He holds PRs, listen to this, 3 minutes, 58 seconds in the mile. That is sub 4-minute mile. You've all heard stories of the iconic breaking for the 4-minute mile. This dude's a cat who's done it. He's got 7:49 in the 3K, 13:18 in the 5K. Those numbers mean less to me because I don't know how long 5K is. What is 5K, Alex? How far is that? Is 3 miles?
So 3.12 miles, if you want to be precise, yeah.
Got it. My wife did a color run a couple years ago. It was a 5K, which is awesome. And we're going to get into so much. So Alex coaches the best, most elite runners in the world. And when I say that, that's not hyperbolic. Literally, where are you working right now, Alex? Tell the group about what you're doing for your day job.
Sure. So my current gig at the moment is I'm a professional coach for the track and field athletes who specialize in distance events. So that includes the 1,500 meters, which is just short of a mile, up to the marathon. We are a Nike sponsored group, and it's called the Nike Swoosh Track Club. It's located in Eugene, Oregon, which for those who know is considered Tracktown, USA, really the birthplace of Nike. And I've been doing this for about a year now, a year and a half, I guess, and it's been the adventure of a lifetime.
Welcome to Fulfillment Project. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, rate us 5 stars, and share this episode with a friend or text it to a random number. If you want more, subscribe to Fulfillment Project Premium on Substack, where we release additional resources to personalize this content to your life. Let's get back to it. So literally, you're mixing with some of the best athletes in the world. Why would an athlete choose to join the Nike Swoosh Track Club? And did they change it from the Bowerman Club? Did the name change?
It did, actually. Thanks for clarifying. For anyone listening, Jerry Schumacher, who's my boss and the head coach of the group, coached the Bowerman Track Club from 2008 until last year. And then Nike Sports Marketing has rebranded its North American distance portfolio. And we're now under the umbrella of the Nike Swoosh Track Club, and we're located in Eugene. So it's semantics. We have the same personnel, the same resources, all that. But yes, for those who are familiar with Bowerman, we still have continuity with the group, same athletes, same coaches, all that. Yeah.
So what would attract an athlete to the Bowerman group other than wanting to run with the best runners in the world and have the best coaches, including you, in the world?
Yeah, exactly. I think one of the things that I would be looking for if I was a professional athlete coming out of college would be, whose track record speaks for itself, right? Like, where can I join a group where my desired behavior is already the default? It's already the norm. And this is a group that's been able to collect more medals than any other group in modern American history. And so if those are your aspirations, if you want to be an Olympic medalist or you want to be at the top of the world at the World Championships, then I'd say look no further than like a system that has a proven track record of success. This is a coach who's been at it for a long time. He's learned how to reverse engineer the demands of performance at that level. And it's proven time and time again to work. He's made all the mistakes that you can make. He's learned the ways to be successful. And I think that attracts a lot of talent.
I love that. And one thing I love about you particularly, Alex, is in your Substack, The Rundown, which I recommend everyone go check out, you do a lot of cross connection to connecting running things, or maybe I'm just connecting them in my head, but I think you do a good job at connecting how running can impact the rest of your life. And so much of it, like excellence, is kind of the same, I think, or at least that's the way I think of it, is if you want to be excellent at running, you need to develop certain habits. And maybe the particulars of the habit are different than if you want to excel at business or investing or whatever you're trying to get really good at. But there's a lot of continuity there. Do you find that to be true in your work?
That resonates with me so deeply. I love to be around people who are pursuing mastery in any domain. I had the good privilege of going to Stanford University, where I was surrounded by people who are considered masters of the universe, right? Like in terms of investors, entrepreneurs, inventors, and just getting a front row seat to like what people look like when they're at their best and they're at the pinnacle of their domain, whatever it is so inspiring to me. And I love surrounding myself with those people. I really do believe that the pursuit of mastery is fundamentally connected at the highest levels. So if you take a 99th percentile performer in a sport like running, and you compare them to a 99th percentile performer in something like music, let's just say a musician, I think those people are more similar than the 50th and 99th percentile performer within the domain itself. And I actually got this story. There's a great...
Whoa.
Yeah, there's a great... I got that idea from a guy named Josh Waitskin, who, if the audience doesn't know him, he was the main character in the movie called Searching for Bobby Fischer, which is he was an American chess prodigy. And about halfway through his career, he decided to completely reinvent himself and become a master of, I think it might have been Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or grappling, and then rose to the top of the world in that domain too. And he said there was one time where he was at some elite training center and he was on the bike next to the quarterback of like the New York Giants or something like that. And they were just having this conversation that was so relatable, so empowering. And he's like, you know what? We have more in common than like anybody who's doing this, like either is in either of our domains at a much lower level, because I think mastery is connected in that way. So I absolutely love finding those commonalities and those common threads.
So one thing I love about you, Alex, is your humility. So you're obviously top tier, first class. You're training the best. You must be the best to coach the best. Yet one of your taglines I saw you write somewhere is, you're just trying to stay fast enough to remain relevant. Did I butcher that? Is that pretty close?
No, that's right. I think my life has gone through many different seasons, and I feel like I only have so much discretionary energy to spend on different hobbies and habits in my life. And so I feel like in the span of a long life, which might be 80 years, you can do a lot of different things, but you can't do them all at the same time. And I have felt as though there's trade-offs with everything, right? So many people look for a path in life that's easy and that requires no sacrifice and no trade-offs. But I think the one thing that I've realized is that any habit that you're pursuing at a really, really high level comes with a cost. And usually that means narrowing the scope and the aperture in your life and other domains. And so I joke with people that I stay fit enough now to be able to pace the professional women on the team that I'm coaching, which is still challenging for me. Like, it wouldn't have been challenging in like my undergrad days when I was in college, but now I just want to stay fit enough to be useful there. And I've realized that I've had to triage my effort and my resources in slightly other directions in order to be a great coach. Because I think at the end of the day, professional running requires you to take a lot of energy for the world, and coaching requires you to put a lot of energy into the world. And those things are, I think, mutually exclusive. They can't always happen well at the same time.
Yeah, well, and I was wondering about the bridge to being an athlete like you were, highest level, and then going to be a coach. Was it natural to you, or did you have to learn concretely different skills to make that bridge to coaching?
That's a really great question, because I feel like for a lot of athletes who don't have direction as they're nearing retirement, which every athlete is probably going to retire between 20 and 40, which is at a time when so many other people are reaching the inflection point in their careers, which is really difficult. So many people that don't have a clear sense of purpose and direction, a lot of them kind of get pulled into coaching as the default choice. And if there's anything about me that I try to define myself by, is that I think I recognize that there's always a pull towards mediocrity, and I try to resist it at every chance that I can get.
Yeah, you revert to the mean. You always revert to the mean.
Right. There's always a regression to the mean. Exactly. And so I was like, if I want to go into coaching, I don't want to just drift into that and be a passenger in my life. I want to be a driver, and I want to do this at a really, really high level. So I think there were certain kind of idiosyncrasies. There were certain things that made me a little bit unusual as an athlete that lended themselves really well to becoming a coach. It's always like, what was the weird thing that you had as a teenager? Ultimately, that thing is going to become your competitive advantage, I feel. And for me, it was like, I actually derived a lot of enjoyment out of reading research papers about exercise physiology, thinking about strategies for applied sports science. I love talking with coaches. And like, that's not a normal trait for most athletes who are competing. A lot of the best athletes just learn how to turn their brain off and just go out and do it. Yeah. And so this natural sense of curiosity that guided me, ultimately, I think there was this convergence of factors, both between timing, luck, opportunity, and preparation, that all intersected at the right time for me to take this opportunity and become a professional coach.
You've said so many things. I'm just trying to pick them all up. One thing is just being excellent at whatever you do. And in order to be excellent, you only have so much bandwidth, so much energy in the day. And like, that goes for my wife, who's trying to be a stay-at-home mom, and me, who's trying to be a businessman. It's like, how do you filter out the noise? How do you prioritize so that you're focusing on what you want to focus on? How do you even know what to focus on? It seems like when there's so many options in front of you, how do you know where to direct your focus?
It's a great question, and you've actually touched on one of my other passions, which is just productivity and how to have a clear, a clear mind in today's world, because I feel like we're always inundated with inputs, and we rarely have time just to sit with ourselves and process things as they come in. And I would say that most people live a life of being very reactive rather than proactive. And that's something that, again, that I try to resist. Someone once told me that an hour before 9 a.m. is worth two after 5. And there's certain pockets of the day where you can actually cultivate and protect that quiet time. And for me, like, that is something that I try to design intentionally. I really, if I were to say this succinctly, I try to be an architect of my own life rather than just drifting from one thing to the next. And so I have found that there's certain habits and things for me that are one-time actions that are, like, give me massive leverage in terms of productivity and focus. I'll just give like a couple of examples, and I don't want to get too nerdy here, but like, I personally, when I wake up in the morning, my phone automatically defaults into a focus filter of do not disturb. I have that set up so that I am not going to get text messages unless you're one of my favorite contacts. Favorites as in something that I've set as, like, someone who's on speed dial, basically. I never sleep with my phone near my bedside because I'm like, what do you normally do from like 10 to 11 p.m.? It's never really anything that productive. It's usually scrolling and YouTube and whatnot. I try to do something hard every morning, which is I usually will exercise, just because I think hard work works on you just as much as you work on it. And I also just, like, personally feel like the majority of people, I would say their behaviors are dictated by chasing short-term dopamine spikes. They are a lot of times reacting to, like, distractions. And I just feel like there are ways to cultivate a meaningful and a purposeful lifestyle with intentionality and I just feel like a lot of people miss out on those opportunities. And I will say, yes, I am privileged in certain ways. I'm a guy in my late 20s without children, so I have more control over my schedule. And this may not be applicable to your entire audience. But even if you don't have that perfectly optimized lifestyle, I think there's one thing you can do to take a step in that direction. And I can guarantee that some other people have had it worse and done it better. And so that's always my mindset, is like, how can I continue to just kind of move this needle forward a little bit every day?
Well, yeah. And you're a guy in his 20s. I'm a guy in my late 30s. Something we can do that anyone can do is put the phone down. Putting the phone down will change people's lives. It wakes you up to the moment, and it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. My son's ringing the doorbell at my office here.
No worries.
In his underwear for the whole town to see. Oh,
how appropriate. We were just talking about control over your schedule when your kid starts ringing on the doorbell in their underwear.
seriously. Oh my gosh.
These are the inconveniences I don't have to deal with yet in my life.
But what I love is you're focused on optimizing and being the architect. Each of us has their own zone. We each have our own world and our own paradigm. And just because it can't be perfect doesn't mean it can't be better. And you don't go from 0 to 60 in one swoop. You have to take consistent steps for long periods of time. And that connects to an idea that I'm going to say, but then I want to go back because I really want to know what you do before 9 o'clock, because you said those hours are worth two. And I'm curious, in the most valuable part of your day, what does Alex do? But the thought I want to hook into from here is, you said in your latest article on Substack, here's the truth. The only training that you can benefit from is the training you can recover from. And I think a lot of people have ideas of the optimal life, and they want that optimal life now. But you don't just achieve optimal without taking thousands of hours, or at least hundreds of hours of effort to get there. And by the way, no one ever feels like they've achieved it completely. So it's always a constant work in progress. But the point is, if you try to do too much too soon, you're going to burn out. And that's what most people do. That's why New Year's resolutions never work. It's why people join the gym and then pay a monthly recurring bill and they don't use it. So anyway, that is a massive tangent. I want to quickly go back to pre 9 a.m. Alex. What are you doing? You're not on your phone. I know that.
No, yeah. I put my phone in the bathroom, put it on sleep mode, and then I usually try not to touch it for the first 60 to 90 minutes of my day. So usually what I'll do is I'll get up and...
What time? Same time every day or different times?
I get up at 5 a.m. Monday through Friday, and then usually a little bit later on the weekend.
Yeah, baby.
So some people might consider this a little bit pathological, but the first thing I do is I take a cold shower. And let me just say, to set the record straight, this was something I started doing well before Andrew Huberman was a podcaster. So I feel like I beat the masses to this one a little bit.
Yes.
And had decided this was a good habit before it was popularized by certain people doing cold plunges at 4 a.m. So this is something I've literally been doing. I've probably missed like 10 days a year since maybe my sophomore year of college, which is like 10 years ago. I just feel like it's the
Soap? Are
best.
you soaping up, shampooing, or is it
No,
just like,
purely just for the purely to change my state of mind from like being groggy to being very alert. Like I will occasionally, I'm not a coffee drinker, and so that's usually the best way to just jumpstart my day and put myself in a frame of mind and like embody a physical sensation that I feel like is the right way to start. From there, I'm if this hasn't already come up, I love learning and reading, but I love also just being able to retain what I read. So I have an app called Readwise where I filter all of my highlights that I take from my Kindle, from any article that I read or any podcast I listen to, into an app called Readwise, and then it does like spaced repetition where it will resurface 30 quotes that I've read over the past however 5 to 10 years that I've been collecting these things, and I'll typically read them and then I'll try to reflect on them. And I just because I feel like one of the biggest things that I've learned over the years is it's not like experiencing isn't the same thing as learning. Reflecting on experience is what gives the value. And so I will usually read the like look at those quotes and then reflect on them a little bit, and I'll try to journal. That's something I started doing this year. And then I'll typically review training for all of the athletes that I'm coaching, and I like doing that like in an undistracted state of mind where I can look at the whole week, like look at the metrics that are on our dashboard, and then just like see if there's anything that needs to be like see anything that is actionable at that point in time. Once that's all been checked off, then usually I'll try to do like the one task that like I've just been putting off and haven't really gotten around to doing. I feel like your willpower peaks in the morning and then slowly tapers off, and like trying to do that hard thing past 5 p.m. is next to impossible.
oh yeah,
So I'll usually try to knock that, or at least make meaningful progress on that first thing in the morning. And after spending 30, 60 minutes on that, then usually I'll check my phone and get the day started. And as anyone knows, like once you've checked your inbox or checked your phone, like
boom.
I try to delay that as long as possible because it's all downhill from there.
It's all downhill. Once I do the same thing as you, life changing. I put my phone by our coffee pot. That's where all of our chargers are. And I don't look at it until I'm about to go to work. Because the second I look at the phone, my brain starts racing and I see a text, I see an email, and my morning with my family is gone. Those precious moments. And like Robert Kiyosaki says, pay yourself first. And I think even more so than money, the best thing I can do for me and my family is to give us our time, unadulterated, pure, quiet, peaceful time. And the reflection piece that you just hit on a second ago, I want to go back to that. And you said you just got it into journaling. I'm curious why. Why? I mean, I've been journaling for almost 2 decades now. I have a stack of journals in my gun safe, and which has way more journals than guns in it because it's my most valuable possession I have. But the reflecting part of life, I think, changes. I wonder if you look at the most successful people in the world versus the mediocre people. Is reflection the difference? Could it be one of the differences? The really excellent people take time to reflect on where they are, where they were, where they are, and where they want to be, and they make adjustments and act accordingly. Whereas a lot of mediocre people, because life is really busy and it's really crazy and consumerism has pushed so much upon us, from the moment you wake up, you're moving. Everyone says, you've heard this, Alex. How's it going? Oh, I'm busy, really busy. With what? It's like, oh, I got work, I got kids, I got this. We're traveling for game. And it's like, what part of that is fulfilling? Like, no one is zooming out to see the whole picture so that when they zoom in, they're actually moving with intentionality. So, what do you think about reflection being a major component of fulfillment and of success? Could it be, or am I way off?
No, I think you're actually spot on. I mean, I think that a lot of times we're so immersed in the moment, it's hard to actually take the 30,000-foot view of your life and see what's going on because you're just like reacting to this twist or turn and you're trying to solve this problem. And one thing that I've learned is that we the biggest disservice that we do to ourselves is we say, I will remember this, or I'll remember how I feel. Like, it's impossible to like remember the texture of your mind when something was going on. And so actually like one real example of this is I feel like we always misremember the past as better than it was, because when you look back with a sense of nostalgia and rose-colored glasses, all of the open loops that you had at the time have since been closed. All of that uncertainty has been resolved. And I feel like anytime we face difficulty or stress in the future, we're like, oh man, I'm longing for those old days where it was just way simpler, way easier. And one sense of forced accountability that I have is just like, wrestling with these problems and chewing on these difficult things, and sometimes just dealing with difficult things that I have and I'm struggling with on a day-to-day basis, remind me that like I never have it all figured out. I never did back then. The past wasn't better than it was now. Like there's common themes of just like challenges that I'm always going to face. Striving for a problem-free life is not really realistic. It's just like how can I react to these problems in the best way and put my best foot forward on a day-to-day basis. So that's like one example of how I've used journaling, just understanding like again, like we prune and we reshape our memories after the fact, and the accountability that comes from having written it down on that day to me has been very valuable.
Yeah, I love, and the whole methodical process of writing through your fingers, through a pen on paper, it forces my brain to slow down. It forces me to organize. I actually switched several years ago to a dot grid paper because it's easier to indent. So organizing my thoughts, really helpful, writing it down slow. Do you have a journaling process? Mine is I do a journal, and then when I finish a journal, I reread the whole journal. And then once a year, I reread all my journals. And I've since dog-eared certain pages and like found ways to prioritize main themes throughout so I don't have to reread 40 books every year. But like, have you developed a process for how you journal and reflect on what you've written?
It's For me, it's changed a bit over the years. I've gone back and forth between pen and paper and writing on the computer. I actually completely relate to what you're saying. I feel like the forced reflection and being like just having to slow down through a pen and paper helps. One thing I will say though, maybe this is me being just like a Gen Zer. Actually, I'm not quite Gen Z, but like a Gen Z moment is I've actually been very interested to see if I can put all of my journal entries into AI and start to uncover trends, because that's what AI is really, really good at. It's good at sifting through tons and tons of information, and then I think it's really good at like surfacing good questions or identifying common themes. And so that's just like the nerdy side of me, being able to think about like, can I leverage technology to help me get even further with what I'm trying to do? I love asking myself, is there something I'm already doing and I've already protected the time for that can be done better? Like those are great opportunities for improvement. And this is just one thing I've been experimenting with. And I don't know, maybe that just also speaks to like, I love learning. I love tinkering. I love experimenting on myself. And this just happens to be one of the phases that you asked me about that I'm going through right now.
Yeah, well, and you're going to have to let me know how that goes. I just recently finished a cycle. We are so similar, and you're so bright. You're blowing my mind. I pen and paper, use a planner, have for years. I started with the Ziegler planner. I switched over to this intelligent change productivity planner, which I love. But then I discovered the Sansama digital planner, which does everything I've ever wanted, everything my paper planner does, plus something no paper planner ever could. When you start a task, you hit play. It times how long you work on that task. I'm a freak. I like to analyze how much time I spend on each thing. So when I reflect on each day, each week, each month, each quarter, where did my time go? How could I make it better? Or where do I need to lean in and redo the same thing I did because of the success? I loved that. Here's the thing, though. It was almost too efficient where the data wasn't worth the efficiency, because between each task, going to my paper book, crossing it out, writing down how long it took, doing a quick reflection on the task, looking at my next task, thinking about how long it's going to take me, then diving into that next task. Like there's value in the inefficiency of the paper planner for me. And so I'm curious, there's a lot of efficiencies of journaling digitally, and I've tried and I've gone back to the paper journal. And I think maybe for different people, maybe it works better, than for me, or different generations or something like that.
Yeah, it's I think great point. And I think an easy critique and something that I'm always grappling with is that we talk about all these productivity strategies, but I think we have to remember at the end of the day, like, what are we optimizing for, right? Like life itself is not an optimization problem for the sake of efficiency. It's for you to derive more meaning from the things that you want. Like a good thing that one of my bosses once told me is like the reward for good work is more work. And so like if you become the person who's known for just like answering emails within 5 minutes, well, you can be sure that like you're gonna like develop an expectation that people want you to respond really quickly, and you're just gonna get more stuff coming in. So it's like I don't know if my goal is necessarily to be able to handle more things. I think it's to protect that quiet space and the priorities that I want. And I think there's also a little bit of a trap that's easy to fall into, which is that like at the end of the day, like the work itself is all that matters. It's not thinking about the work. It's not preparing for the work. It's not having like a routine that gets you ready to go. Although I do think rituals and routines have value. At the end of the day, it's just about doing the thing and actually being present and grounded in the moment when you're doing it yourself. So yes, I think it's a totally almost fair. It's not necessarily a critique, but it's a good thing to push back on, because I do think that there are places in life where there might be a role for deliberate de-optimization, and that's okay. And that inefficiency is actually good because it leads you down rabbit holes that you otherwise wouldn't have pursued. It allows you to explore some things you otherwise wouldn't have explored. And sometimes efficiency squeezes out meaning, and that's one thing I want to avoid too. So I am always struggling with that and grappling with that, and I love the way you brought it up.
Do you have an extremely high IQ? This is a leading question. I feel like I'm saying things like a monkey, and then it's like when you type a prompt into AI, and what you're giving back to me is like the most beautifully framed, perfect vocabulary, great structure. I'm blown away by your intelligence, the way you can comprehend, decode, and then compute information instantaneously. Alex, you're blowing me away, man. I cannot wait to track you over your lifetime to see where you end up. I mean, blown away. Trying to come back to where we were. Sorry, I was just shocked by what you just said. And not only what you said, but the beauty with which you said it. I'm going to push back again since you kind of gave me permission. What I think I heard you say, correct me if I'm wrong, is the process, the prep, the reflection doesn't matter as much as the thing itself. And I was just making an argument about this in an article I did on the process is the way. And the whole point of the article is we're going to be doing this, our life. We're going to be waking up, doing our morning rituals, routines, working towards goals, tweaking, modifying for literally until the day we die. And a lot of people wait for the peak moments, the thing. They're waiting for the thing. And that's 1% of life. And 99% of life is the process, the reflection, the preparation. And I'm scared, like Adam Sandler's movie Click. You end up missing all of life because you're just waiting for the race. When in reality, there's a lot of practice before that race comes. And what a shame if you miss the beauty of the sky and the sun and the pain and the micro adjustments you're making. So I don't know if I disagree with you or whatnot, but hit me with, because you're a guy who has put in thousands of hours of practice in your life. And were you able to appreciate that, or what were you just getting through it to get to the big show?
I have so many thoughts here. Let me try to break them down succinctly. I think first and foremost, there's this idea that life happens while you're making other plans. And I think so many people put their life on hold for the next big opportunity. Perfect example of this is I worked as a medical scribe in the UNC emergency department. After I had just retired from professional running, I thought I was going to go into medicine. And I took this job, which is like the lowest end of the totem pole in healthcare. You're a medical scribe. You're just like transcribing physician encounters with patients. And what I note, and I ultimately like did that job for 6 months and then got promoted to chief scribe. And that's something I never expected to do, but it just like it happened along the way. And so I was in that leadership role for a year. And one thing I noticed about all of my peers, and this is no knock on them, but all of them wanted to become doctors, and they were operating under this assumption that their real life was on hold until they got accepted into med school. And what I saw was just like they weren't actually enjoying the experience of being a medical scribe and doing the best thing that they could do. It was all just like, how can I add this to my resume? Like, how can I develop a relationship with this doctor just so that I can pad my application and be that much more appealing for a med school admissions officer to let me in? And it just dawned on me, it's just like, never wait for your next job to do your best work, right? Like,
whoa, baby, come on, underline that.
No, thank you. Never wait for your next job to do your best work, because it's like this moment is all that you've got. I mean, it goes back to presence. But I'll say I've struggled with it immensely, though, at other times in my life, because what is the existence of an athlete besides delayed gratification, right? As an Olympic level athlete, which I never quite was, but I got somewhat close, is you get this one moment of validation, typically maybe 2 per year, right? This pinnacle moment that you're preparing for. And it's just like, once I achieve this, then I will be happy. And your ambition is constantly outpacing your satisfaction because you're hardwired to be a driver. And the thing that's so difficult about that is that our neural circuitry is literally hardwired for wanting more than it is liking. And just stepping back and appreciating like, hey, I did something that was pretty good, rather than achieving it and then immediately thinking about the next thing. It's such an easy trap to fall into. And I just had to realize that, like, you know, as an athlete, you're constantly waiting for the next big race. You're constantly waiting for the next big opportunity. And you're like, I'm going to deprive myself of enjoyment in this moment for something that I can have on the other side of that goal. And the reality is that delayed gratification in the extreme is no gratification at all. And so that tension in life is something that I have just felt so many times. And I am really trying to figure that out.
Welcome to Fulfillment Project. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, rate us 5 stars, and share this episode with a friend or text it to a random number. If you want more, subscribe to Fulfillment Project Premium on Substack, where we release additional resources to personalize this content to your life. Let's get back to it. Yeah, dude, I think it's a constant work in progress. You brought up something. I'm working on this article right now. I've been working on it for months, on suffering. It's non-negotiable. I mean, I mention it here and there, but you just said it. And I wonder if that's part of the struggle of delayed gratification and waiting for the moment and putting the blinders on and not living our best life until we get to where we think we want to go. Is suffering's not easy. So it's easier to just kind of turn your mind off and wait for the next thing, hope for the next thing. And I think there's a beauty. So I am a post-Huberman cold plunger, although I still love it. And one of the beautiful things that's taught me is to embrace the suffering, to be in the freezing cold water. And there's nothing like suffering that crystallizes thoughts and moments and experiences. Like, you ask anyone their memories, and it's either going to be a peak joy or a peak suffering in their life. And the cold plunge has also taught me the most valuable thoughts are the thoughts of a person suffering, because they don't have the luxury of wasting time and space with a lot of words. It's like right to the point. I don't know if there's anything there that Coach Alex can unpack for us, but like, how do we open our eyes and wake up in the midst of suffering? How do we embrace it on the training day that's one of 1,000 training days before the big race?
Yeah, I mean, there's this idea that on an ordinary day, you're preparing yourself for an extraordinary moment. Right. And you're going to face discomfort in life. And a lot of times, like, no one really wants to voluntarily expose themselves to discomfort. But I think there's some power in that. Some Stoic philosopher, who exactly I'm forgetting, said something along the lines of, we treat the body rigorously so it is not disobedient to the mind. And that's what I love. Like, the mind is like this beast that you have to tame, right? Doing hard things, doing things that are very grounding, like going out in nature, going out and running, like, there's something very primitive or innate about that, which I really like. And it's one reason why I think I've gravitated towards athletics, because at the end of the day, it draws a very clean line of causation between preparation and outcome. And that's one thing, when I talk to people about the athletes that I coach, I'm like, you think you're prepared? Like, no, you're not. Like, prepare yourself like an Olympic athlete would prepare themselves for a final. They leave no stone unturned. And for that reason, because their life has been totally dedicated to performance and in such an intentional way, they can say, because of these inputs, it led to this output. Whereas, like, the other jobs I've done in the past have been like in the knowledge work economy. And it kind of reminds me sometimes that, like, market dynamics triumph over individual actions all the time. A single operator in a game with 7 billion other people, like, we'd be foolish to say that, like, the accidental impacts of actions of someone else, like, might actually have more influence over your outcomes than what you determine yourself. It's like, I talked about this with Dominic on another podcast, and I was saying, like, if you invested in NVIDIA like 20 years ago, like, you just hit a gold mine, because, like, you hit that wave of growth just at the perfect time. And there's so many things like that in life where it's like, okay, can I attribute this outcome to what I did, or was it market dynamics, or was it something else? And there's something so clean and so pure about athletics that I love, which is that the clock doesn't lie. It's you versus the timer. It's the same thing with weightlifting. The bar doesn't lie. Either it moves or it doesn't. And there's something about that which I absolutely love, and that's why I've gravitated towards athletics. That's why I've stayed in it, and that's why I love coaching it, because there's something about it.
There's such a straight line. The thing about athletics, though, is you're typically facing somebody else. So long as you have the mindset that it's you versus yourself, that's one thing. But there's other competitors, and so maybe your inputs didn't equal the other person's. Maybe their inputs were better. Maybe their inputs were less than yours, but they have more natural or raw talent or different or nutrition. There's so many factors in athletics when you're talking about competition that mimics the free market or the global economy, which is why I think it's such a good comparison. And I want to tie it back to fulfillment. Other things outside of us happen. Outside of our control. The only thing we can impact is ourselves. And if you want to be fulfilled, like, comparing yourself to other people is helpful only insofar as it's helpful. But, like, as soon as it stops being helpful, let it go. Because I'm concerned about Andy and Andy's life, Andy's family, Andy's business. And other people may seemingly have things that are more desirous, but I don't know their whole story. So all I can focus, see, yes, I'm competing against all of them. And by the way, I love sales for the same reason you love athletics is money doesn't lie. You either bring it in or you don't. Whereas other nuanced things like marketing and art is like, how do you put your finger on the value there? You know, but nevertheless, for fulfillment, in my mind's eye, to steal a phrase my mom always uses, it's about yourself. You're competing against yourself and yourself only. When you get too distracted with other people, then that's when you're going to go crazy because you're going to want something they have without paying the price they've had, you know? So insofar as it's motivational, do it. But once it starts to hurt, comparison is the thief of joy. And I say, so I love your comparison there. I think there are so many cross connections.
Absolutely. No, I couldn't have said it better myself. And of course, you're right. There's a little bit of some outcomes in athletics, especially in races where there's tactics involved or whatnot, not to get too deep in that rabbit hole. Of course, you don't have sole control over your outcome entirely. However, the degrees of freedom between like what leads what is how you trace preparation to outcome in athletics compared to like, yeah, something very subjective or something in the market, like it's just a totally different ball game. So that's why I like it. And I do think too, to some extent, something like running is an individual pursuit in the presence of others. And I love that about it, right?
Yeah.
And so there's like, I've done this, like the training partners I've had at the end of the day are some of my closest friends. They're the ones that I've developed some of the most meaningful relationships with. But like me winning a race is a little bit less dependent on like getting like kicked a pass at the right time or like the quarterback choosing to throw the ball to me. It's just like, okay, it's me. For the most part, it's mostly me versus that clock. And like the clock doesn't lie. And that's what I love about it.
And I think running is a great parallel to life because in so many things, it's us versus ourselves in the presence of others. And you also have to learn to filter out the noise of other people because you've got bosses and managers and other people telling you how you should do it and what you shouldn't have done and how you could make this better. And like, those are all great inputs so long as they're inputs only and you make the final calculation on how you're going to proceed going forward and it doesn't beat you up. I'm probably one of the most sensitive people I know. So that's something I'm constantly where I always throw myself at criticism because I just need it immediately like a Band-Aid so I can process it and filter it. You said something too, and it goes back to the struggling idea where I wonder if some of the most positive relationships a person can have are relationships where they're struggling with somebody. And I think about me and my wife, like the world of 10 years of marriage and all the ups and downs and adoption and people that have natural births, conceiving, and then you actually get the thing you want so much, this beautiful child. And it's really, really hard. But like, it either makes you or it breaks you, I think. And for my wife and I, we're fortunate. It has totally brought us together in the idea of business and athletics. Suffering, if you have a life on easy street, which is what people think they want, but don't really, I don't think. Like if you're not suffering, you're not creating those bonds and relationships. I don't know. I just feel like, would you say with your athletes you're struggling with every day, you're working towards positive outcomes, but you have to struggle to get there. There's a lot of work along the way. Do you think that enhances the relationship, the personal relationship you have with these people?
Yes. And so to make a quick distinction, I do think there's sometimes a difference in life between voluntary suffering and involuntary suffering, right? Like, make no mistake, these athletes are choosing to put themselves on the line, choosing to do these hard workouts. There are certain things that you may struggle with in life that it's not something where you walked into that situation. Life just like punched you in the face and you had to react to it. One thing which might be interesting for your article, and it's a comment more broadly on this topic, there's a book called Tribe by Sebastian Junger, which talks about what really binds people together. And there's this fascinating psychological research that looks at the rates of depression and suicide in developed modern countries. And they find that the rates of depression and suicide plummet in the aftermath of natural disasters. And actually people who are involved in like active combat, like they're not really depressed or anxious in the moment. A lot of it comes after the fact. And sure, there's obviously post-traumatic stress, which I don't want to discount. But the broader point that he's making is that it's these challenging events that we go through together that actually bring out the best in humanity. And people long for those moments because it's ultimately like it shatters your status quo so much when you're going through something difficult that you're forced to rely on your neighbor in a way that you wouldn't otherwise be. And I think that brings out the best in people. And so you should check out that book and you should look at that research because I think it speaks to the issue of like is there something positive that can come from struggle and something that positive that can come from suffering?
One, I'm getting the book immediately after we record this. And I touch on a similar theme in another article where I talk about putting voluntary struggle on yourself. So when the involuntary struggle comes, you're more prepared for it. For me, that's cold plunge. For me, that's running. For me, that's lifting weights. These are things that I have to struggle through that I don't want to do, where it's more of a mental decision that I am going to do this, even though I don't want to. It's like I must subject myself to this so that when moments in life come, the task at work I don't want to do, the one thing I've been putting off, the hard conversation I have to have, the discipline of not eating that, even though it tastes good, but I don't want to overeat. Like, I need to subject myself to voluntary suffering. So when involuntary suffering comes away, things out of our control, my control, I'm ready for it. I'm prepared. I don't know. I think there's something there. And I love that you made that distinction.
Yeah, and I'll just, one more quote that popped into my mind when you were talking, and this is something that I'll say to the athletes all the time. It's that you don't rise to the level of your expectations, you fall to the level of your preparation and training. And so like, think about like you have your ceiling and your floor. Like you don't just by chance hit your ceiling. You actually get better performances, in my opinion, by raising the floor, right? Like supporting your worst day or your average day by bringing that up little by little. And so that's why the people who are like, I always say to the athletes too, like, we don't train to make the races feel easy. Like, no matter how fit you are, when you're, I'll just use a mile as an example, when you're 1,200 meters or 3/4 of the way through a mile, like there's no escaping that discomfort. Like that's going to be hard no matter how fit you are. How fast you're running may depend on your level of fitness, but it's going to be hard either way. So like we train hard in this moment to prepare yourself for that exact sensation, not to make that feel easier.
Whoa, man. 100%. I did my first VO2 max workout yesterday. And what's crazy about VO2 is you're pushing yourself to your personal threshold. So it's always like, just like you said, like your personal discomfort will always be there if you're at zone 5. And maybe you're running faster, but it's still going to be just as uncomfortable. You know, I may be running a 12-minute mile at that pace and you may be running a 5-minute mile, but like we're still feeling that same burn. Okay, we're at 46 minutes. I've got so much more prepared, Alex. We're going to have to pick this up another day, but let's wrap it. Last thing, I just have to know, I ran my first marathon. It was my first Musogi I've ever done. That's a whole nother topic I won't get into, but 5 hours, 10 minutes was my time, 12-minute pace, and comparison's the thief of joy, but I'm not going to let this steal my joy. I'm just ultimately curious. The last marathon you ran, what was your time?
So actually, this is a little bit of a fun fact about myself. I've never run a marathon myself. I always qualify that by saying I could do it tomorrow if I wanted to, but the way the collegiate system works, for those who don't follow running, is you don't actually ever compete in anything longer than a 10K. So the marathon is uncharted territory for me. I've done a half marathon, I've done a 10K, I've done every distance in between, but the marathon is that one scary goal that's still looming in the future. I think, and it's dangerous to project, I think I could run under 2 hours and 20 minutes if I trained properly for it, but that's hypothetical. I'll have to trade that dream of success for the reality of feedback one day.
You've never done 26.2, just even at like a city marathon or something like that?
Hasn't happened yet. Nope.
Dude,
I'll let you know when I do.
Please, I will be on the sideline ringing the cowbell with some semi-inappropriate sign. I couldn't believe I'd never run a race before this marathon. It was my first one. I'd never done a 5K, never done a 10K or anything like that. And everyone said, just wait for the energy of race day. And wow, were they right. I mean, I'm not saying I'm going to become a marathoner or even ever run another one again, but it was a palpable energy I've never experienced before. Did you feel that on the collegiate track? Was there that hype there that didn't exist on training day?
Absolutely. The energy that you get from crowds is real, it's tangible, and I think it infuses what you're doing with a little bit more purpose. Another thing I'll always tell the athletes is, like, I think the people who make it the furthest in the sport are the ones who have a purpose that always looms larger than the pain. I think I wrote about that in a newsletter. It's like when the discomfort overshadows the purpose, you give into the discomfort, but when the purpose looms so much larger than the discomfort, like, you find a reason to keep going. And having parents, partners, like siblings, people that have been with you along that journey on the sidelines is just a tangible reminder of, hey, this is why I'm doing it. And that's not something you get on your average training day. So capitalizing on that energy is definitely something that I feel like you get. That is a distinct advantage on race day.
Alex, you're a king. Dude, you're the absolute man. I feel truly humbled. You accepted my invitation. Thank you. I'm going to ask everyone to go over to the Rundown on Substack, subscribe, support Alex. Alex, anything else you want to share that went unsaid? Any thoughts lingering? You get the last word, brother.
Oh, no, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure and privilege to be on the podcast today. I'll just give a quick shout out. I was joking earlier with Andy. I don't have a big social media presence. A few people occasionally drag me out of my cave, and the newsletter was one thing I thought I could do on my own terms. So if you're interested in performance, if you're interested in the interdisciplinary connections between running and life and philosophy, I love exploring those ideas. If you like this conversation and you want to taste it a little bit more, feel free to subscribe. And thank you. I love what you're doing. I've listened to a few of your other episodes, and I think it's having a very positive impact on your community. So I'm excited to see what the future holds.
Me too, Alex. I'm a big fan of yours. I subscribe. I can't get enough. I love the way you tie all these things together. All right, brother. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Fulfillment Project. If you got this far, I hope you've gotten something out of it. Share it with a friend and subscribe so you don't miss any of the future episodes. See you next time.